Join me as we learn for the fourth Torah reading of Parshas Vayakhel and Pekudei when they are combined on a non-leap year. So this Torah reading will take us from Vayakhel, and then into the last Torah reading of the book of Exodus, Pekudei. Yesterday we learned about the construction of the menorah and the inner altar. Today we'll continue to learn about the outer altar, the laver, and the hangings in the courtyard, moving into the Torah reading of Pekudei, where we now makes a summary and accounting, as well as the making of the garments for the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol. Chapter 38, verse 1. Vayases mizbach ha'olah. And he now makes the sacrificial altar. Atzei shita made out of acacia wood, chomesh amis orke, which were 5 cubits in its length, v'chomesh amis rachbei, 5 cubits in its width. Ravua, it was a square, v'shalish amis kemosing, and 3 amos, 3 cubits in its height. Vayaskar noisav alarbra pinoisav, and he made protrusions on all of its 4 corners. Mimenu hayu karnoisav, from it itself were coming those protrusions. Vayitzaf etzem nechoshes, and he covered it in copper. Vayasas kol klei mizbechas, and therefore he made all the vessels, utensils that were needed for the altar, as asires, the pots, yoim, the scoops, vesam mizrakes, and the basins, vesam mizlakes, and the flesh hooks, vesam and the fire pans, kol kelevas and nechoshes, all of the utensils were made in copper. Verse 4, Vayaslam mizbech, and then he made for the altar michber mashes seresesh, he made a copper network which was under the decorative border, tachas kakubay, under the decorative border, mulmata ad chasi, from the bottom downwards towards until the middle. Verse 5, Vayitzik arba tabayis barba ksavis, then he put 4 rings on the 4 edges of the copper gate, lemichbar and nechoshes of the copper gate, bottom lebadim, which these would house the poles and when they would carry it. Vayasas abadim atzeshitim, and he made the poles out of acacia wood, vayitzafes and nechoshes, and made them and coated them in copper. Verse 7, Vayavi abadim etabois, and then they inserted the rods in the rings, al salis hamizbeich, on the sides of the altar, losis esabehem, to carry them, nevu v'luches asa isam. He made the altar a hollow structure of panels because they would fill it with earth. Rashi 7. What does it mean, nevuv luches asa isam? Nevuv means hu chalul, it was empty, it was hollow on the inside. V'chein ve'avi arba etzba'am is nevuv. We so find it as in Jeremiah uses a terminology when he talks about the describing of the thickness of the walls of every pillar that was in the holy temple. It was 4 fingers by 4 fingers and hollow on the inside. Nevuv luches, what does it mean? Hollow, meaning the boards that were of acacia wood on each side, and then it was hollow on the insert, which they would then fill with earth. Verse 8, and then he made the copper laver. And then the basin of it was also made out of copper. What was it made from? It was used the mirrors of the legions of women, Asher Tzavu Pesach Oyel Moyed, who congregated at the entrance of the tent of meeting. What does this mean? And Rashi explains why and what the significance and unique quality that these mirrors had. Rashi explains, the Jewish women, girls, had mirrors that they would use them when they would decorate themselves. And they did not withhold from bringing them to the holy temple as a donation. However, Moshe was disgusted by it and said, how can you bring these mirrors? They were used to pretty yourself, and this was towards the evil inclination. Amar le'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God said to Moshe, Kibel, take these mirrors. Ki elu chavivin alay min hakoil, I cherish these mirrors more than anything else. Shal yedeyim hemidu anashim tzvayis rabis, because of this, the Jewish people were able to have legions and legions of Jews. Because in Mitzrayim in Egypt, because when their husbands were working really hard in the field, they would go to their husbands in the field and bring them food and drink, and feed them, and they would take the mirrors and they would show themselves together with their husbands in the mirror and show how beautiful they are. And they would try to convince them with words, saying, look, I am beautiful from you. and this way seducing their husbands that they should be together with them and to be able to be intimate, and thereby becoming pregnant and giving birth to children. This was the ability and getting their husbands to be with them. As it says, under the apple tree, I inspired you to give birth. And that's why it says, with the mirrors of the legions. The copper basin was made out of it. Being that this was going to bring peace between man and woman, because eventually this would also bring peace. Then when a person was alleged his wife for being promiscuous, so they would bring them to the holy temple and they would have to drink the special potion of waters. They would have to take the water from the kiyur and mix it together, and it would say if it was happened or not. You should know. And a proof mamish that they would made from these actual mirrors. And as it says later on, when it talks about the accounting of how much copper there was 70 kikar, but it doesn't mention that the kir and the kane amongst them, the washing basin and the laver. This teaches us that when the kiyar was made, when the washing basin was made, it did not include from the regular copper that was donated. It was special from the copper that was from the mirrors of these women who had a special merit that they brought the Jewish children into this world. This is the way Rabbi Tanchuma explains it, as well as the way the Unclus translates it. B'mechsis nishaya, with the mirrors of the women, who targum shel miris. We find this in Yeshaya as well, when he talks about and enumerates the jewelry and the items that women had. And he translates mechsiyisa, things that you see yourself in. Asher tzavu, that they were gathering, lahavi nidvas, and they gathered together by the tent of gathering to bring their donation. Verse 9, Vayasas HaChatzer, now we go on to the construction of the courtyard. Vayasas HaChatzer, and he made the courtyard, Lifas Negev Teman on the south, Kali HaChatzer Sheish Matzor Me'ah Ba'ama. There were twined linen, 100 cubits long. Amudeim Esrim, there were 20 pillars, Vadneim Esrim, and 20 sockets and choshes made out of, the sockets made out of copper. Vavei Amud V'chashukeim Kasav, the hooks and the bands that were made for the bands around the pillars were made out of silver. Verse 11, and then to the north side, Me'abama was another 100 cubits, Amudeim Esrim, 20 pillars, Vadneim Esrim, 20 sockets, Necheshes made out of copper, Vavei Amudim, the hooks, Vachushukeim, and the decoration, Kasav made out of silver. And then to the west side, Kloim, there was also curtains made, Chamishim Bama, 50 cubits, Amudeim Asara, over there was 10 pillars, Atneim Asara, 10 sockets, Vavei Amudim, Vachushukeim, Kasav, over there the hooks and the decorations were all silver. Then to the east side, you also had 50 amas, 50 cubits. You had 15 cubits on each side, and it was 3 pillars and 3 sockets. 15, and then on the other side, Mizeh on both sides, the Shara Chatzar to the opening of the courtyard. Kloim, there were curtains, 15 cubits long on each side. Amadeim Shleisha, 3 pillars and 3 sockets to each one. Kol Kali Chatzar Saviv Sheish Matzar, all the curtains that were used were linen, twined linen was the material. V'ha'adonim, 17, V'ha'adonim, and the sockets that were used, Lamudim, for the pillars of the courtyard, the Choshes were made out of copper. However, the hooks and the decoration around the pillars, kasef, were silver. And the covering on the top of them, kasef, was also silver. And they were all silver, banded with silver on all the pillars of the courtyard. Verse 18. And the curtain, the screen of the entrance of the courtyard, Maser was this woven tapestry of tchelas vargaman, made out of turquoise and purple wool, v'seilah shani and red wool, scarlet wool, v'sheish mazar and linen twined, v'esrim amma oirech, and it was 20 amos, 20 cubits long. V'koyim, and its height, v'reichav, and the width chamish amos, 5 cubits, l'umas kali achatzer, on the crocheted hanging side of the courtyard. Verse 19, v'amudeim, Rashi, l'umas kali achatzer, kemidas kali achatzer, the measurement of the hanging curtain of the courtyard. Verse 19, V'amudeim arba, And the pillars were 4, Vadneim Arba, and its sockets were 4, and the chayshes were made out of copper, Vaveim, its hooks, kasaf, or silver, Tzipu de Sherem Chashikisem, the top of them and their decorations were silver. V'chol Yesedus LaMishkan, and all the different pegs, stakes that were used for the tabernacle, V'lachotzer, and for the courtyard, around, Savif, all around, chayshes were made out of copper. We now go into the chapter 38, verse 21, starting the section of reading of Pekudei. Now that everybody donated and the things were made, a tally had to be made of everything that was donated. This is the count. This is the appointments that were made over the tabernacle. Mishkan Eidus, the tabernacle of testimony. Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe, this was commanded and assigned by Moshe. Avodas Alavim, the work of the Levites. Biyadi Samar ben Aaron HaKohen, in the hands of Isamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. Rashi, Eila Pekudei. What is the saying? And he tells us as follows. B'Parsha Zu, why is this called Eila Pekudei? These are the assignments, because in this Torah reading, Nimnu kol mishkan l'nidus mishkan, everything was counted of whatever was contributed, la kesef, la zavel, and the chayshes, the silver, the gold, and the copper, Nimnu kol kelev v'chol avedasi as well, all the items that were needed were counted as well. Why does it say the word ha-mishkan and then mishkan again? A double terminology. It was alluding to the fact that the holy temple and that was destroyed twice, and it was taken as a collateral. The word mishkan can also come from the word mashkan, which means a collateral. Al Avinei and Shal Yisrael was taken because of the sins of the Jewish people. Mishkan ha'edus, the testimony of the tabernacle. Edus l'Yisrael shaviter l'makadosh baruch hu ma'aseh egel shehishresh chinasa behem. The tabernacle would be a testimony for the Jewish people that God has forgiven them on the sin of the golden calf. The very fact that the divine presence would rest amongst them. Avodas haLeviyim, the work of the Leviyim. Pekudei HaMishkan v'Kelev, the assignment of the Mishkan and its vessels would be done. This was given as a service to the Levites in the desert. To carry, to take down, and to put back up. Each person according to their appointment as described in the Torah reading of Nasai in the book of Numbers. Bayadi Summer, in the hands of Isamar, he was in charge of all the Levites to give each person their exact job that they needed to do. Betzalel the son of Uri, the son of Hur, for the tribe of Yehuda, did everything that God commanded Moshe. Verse 22, Rashi, that God commanded Moshe. Over here it says everything that God commanded Moshe, not that Moshe told him, meaning even things that Moshe did not tell him. God agreed and said, this is the way I intended and what it should be said from Mount Sinai. For example, Moshe told Betzalel first do the vessels and then afterwards do the tabernacle, the building, the structure. Betzalel tells Moshe, generally in the world, if you don't have a house, what are you buying furniture for? First you got to build a house and then you can get furniture. But Moshe tells him, but this is what God told him. Moshe says, their name Betzalel makes up of two words, Betzel Kel, in the shadow of God, in the advice of God, meaning that you understand yourself what God really intended should be done. Probably that's what God commanded me to do. And that's exactly what he did. First he did the actual tabernacle, and only afterwards, and afterwards he did the vessels. Verse 24. All the gold that was used for the work of the tabernacle, and all the holy work, and the amount that it weighed of the gold that was used for the work, the gold of the wave offering, it was 24 talents of gold, and 730 shekel, but shekel HaKodesh in the holy shekel. Kikar, so Rashi gives us a count here to be able to figure out how much this is. Shishim mana, which is 60 mana, mana shel kodesh kafel. Then if you count one of the holy ones, because it says b'shekel hakodesh is double. Harei kikar kufchaf mana, so a kikar, a talent of mana is 120 mana. Usha mana chafei slaim, a mana, each mana is worth 25 slaim. Harei kikar shel kodesh leishes alafim shkalim, so if you take a talent of gold, would be about 3,000 shkalim. Lefichach mana bepruta kol shkalim. Therefore he counts in detail all the different shkalim that were extra that didn't make it to the 3,000. Shein magiin lekikar, because it wouldn't fit into the talent of gold, because a talent is worth of 3,000 shekel. Today, that would be worth about 3,095 pounds. Do the math, at $4,000 an ounce, you're talking about a lot of gold. Verse 25. The Vayakhel-Pekudei and the silver that came from the community, ma'as kikar was 100 talents, which would be the math, Ve'elef v'shvameis and 1,700 v'chamisha and v'shivim and 75, that's 1,775 shekel b'shekel HaKodesh in holy shekel. Rashi, for next one, Beka lo gulgoilas, then a Beka went per head, machatzis shekel, which was a half a shekel b'shekel HaKodesh, chol ha'ived al pekudim, whoever of those that were 20 years and up that were counted, ben esrim shana v'mayla l'sheish shmeyes elef, that was 600,000, u'shloishes alafim and 3,000, v'chamesh shmeyes v'chamishim, 603,550 people in total were counted that had to give a half a shekel. Beka, the word Beka, whose shei mishkel is the name of a weight of the machatzis shekel. L'sheish shmeyes elef of 600,000. Kachayu Yisrael, this was the amount of Jewish people that gave the half a shekel of 603,550. V'kach olam minyanim achar shuk mishkan, and so too is the same count when they put up the tabernacle. B'sefer b'midbar, the beginning of the b'midbar. V'af ata b'nidvas hamishkan kachayu. And you'll notice that the count hasn't changed from now until then, which was about, even though 6 months passed in between the two counts. Minyan chatzai shkolim, and the amount of the half a shekel shall show shmei elef of the 600,000. Oila be'as kikar comes out to 100 kikar. Kol echad shall shleishes alafim shkolim, because every kikar is about 3,000. Ketzad, how do you get that math? Sheish shmei elef chatzin. If you have 600, a half a shekel, so they shleish shmei elef shleimim. That makes you 300,000 whole shekel. Harei ma'as kikar, 100 kikar, shlish alav chamesh meis chamishim chatzayim. So you have 100 kikar and 3,550 halves of, besides whatever was there, oilim elaf u'shvameis chamishim shivim shkalim, gives you an amount of 3,550 times 2, makes it divided by half, gives you 1,775. Verse 27. Vayhi ma'as kikar. What did they use with all this 100 kikar that they had at the time? They used it for the 100 kikar lotsekes, which this was used for casting. As adni hakodesh, the holy sockets, as adni hapareches, and the sockets of the paroches of the curtain. Ma'as adonim, 100 sockets. Lamas kikar adon. That means you have 100 sockets, 100 kikar. So you have every socket weighed a kikar, was a talent of silver. Rashi lotsekes. To cast as adni hakodesh, the holy sockets, al karshei mishkan, for the beams, for the planks that we used for the tabernacle. Shememches krashim, there were 48 planks. V'lehem tzadik vavadonim, that makes it 96 sockets. Adni hapareches arba. Then for the curtain had another 4. So total you have 100. To kol shir adonim necheshes ksivem, because all the other ones were made out of copper. Verse 28. And then you have another 1,700 v'chamisha v'shivim and 75, another 1,775 of the silver was used. Asavavim lamudim were made for hooks, for rings of the pillars, v'tzipa rasheim, and the tops of the pillars, v'chisha koisem, and its decoration around the side. Verse 29. V'tzipa rasheim Rashi shalamudim mehen shabakuling si v'tzipa rasheim v'chushkeim l'kasef. On all the other pillars, even the ones in the courtyard, they had this decoration around it that was made out of silver, and the top of it was coated in silver as well. Verse 29, and the amount that weighed for the copper, Shivim kikar was 70 kikar, Valbayim varba me'eh shekel, and 2,400 shekel. Verse 30, Vayas ba'asadni pesach oil, with that copper they made the sockets of the entrance of the tent of gathering, Vesmizbach ha'nechoshes, and the altar for the copper altar for sacrifices, Vasmich ba'nechoshes, and its netting, Asher loy, Veskol klemas mech, and all its utensils. Vesadni ha'chotzer, as well as the sockets of the courtyard, Saviv around it, Vesadni shara chotzer, and the sockets of the courtyard's opening, Veskol yisis hamishkan, and all the pegs, the stakes that we use to be able to bang into the ground to keep it going, Veskol yisis ha'chotzer Saviv, and all the stakes of the courtyard around. Chapter 39, verse 1, Uminat chilas vargamen, and from the turquoise wool, purple wool, and the scarlet wool, also big disrad. They made these packing blankets, the netted packing, l'shadis b'kodesh, that they would use to move all the items. Vayasus big da'kodesh shel Aaron, and they made the holy garments for Aaron, kasher tziv Hashem es Moshe, like God commanded Moshe. Rashi, Minat chelis vargamon, and from the turquoise wool and the purple wool. Sheish lenemerkan, it doesn't say linen. Mikana neyemer, from here I say shein bigdei asrad alalu bigdei konaf. Therefore, if you remember, Rashi mentioned earlier that when he talks about bigdei asrad, it's not talking about the actual garments that the Kohen were. Bigdei kuna yeshesh, because in the garments that the Kohen were, there was linen. Alahab these were the garments. Shemechasim bem klei hakodesh v'shasilik masay shlei bem sheish. These were the moving blankets that they used to cover all the items of the vessels when they were moving from place to place, and there was no linen in it. This concludes the fourth Torah reading for Parshas Vayakhel and Pekudei.